All right, everybody. Soccer Dad Pod time. Got another one for you today. Today is a rare one where we're Zoomers. We're not boomers. We're Zoomers, which is rare in our world.
It's not so rare in my world, as you know.
Yeah, no. I mean, everybody just figured that out based on your robotic voice there, Zach. Zach Lewis joining me today is the Carpool co-host. I've let that fall by the wayside for a while. I want to bring that back. Even though we're not carpooling anymore, because now our kids are old enough to do it themselves.
Yeah.
So let's just start there. How happy are you that you have a 16-plus-year-old and your me time increased exponentially?
It's been such a life-changing event, yet scary as well. So yeah, it's nice because I don't have to think about all the times I have to get up and drive everywhere. But it's also terrifying knowing that my 16-year-old is. So yeah, it's a blessing and a anxiety fueler.
Kind of like your wedding day, right?
Actually, well, that's another story.
That's a different kind of anxiety.
Yes.
Oh man, so we're here today. We got another episode. We're going to be talking all things soccer. Imagine that, from the collegiate level, coaching, recruiting, etc. We're going to be sprinkling in a good load of MLS Academy insights from the heartland over there in experiences in Central Ohio. We're going to be covering all that, but wanted to real quickly thank everybody for listening to the show. Can't emphasize enough. If you take a second, in the morning when you're, grabbing your coffee, just hit the review button. Just write a few words down, early in the day. Don't do it after you've had a bad day at work and you're going to take it out on us. Do it early in the day. We'll take that solid 4 or 5 stars is nice. A little bit of a comment. And I can't emphasize enough how much that helps us kind of, one, spread our stories, spread what we have going on here to other markets, but it brings in new guests as well. And we want to keep feeding you, the listener, with some of these juicy tidbits. So thank you for listening. Last couple of episodes, I got to regroup here because we do these things kind of somewhat chronologically, but we might bounce them around. We were talking with Clayton High School coach, which was really fun because for those of you that are in high school soccer markets, this is a great one because here's a kind of a minnow in a big pond, right? That they're punching up. They just won state title. We talked about the role that they play in competing for players between academy and high school, 1, and then 2. Obviously, here in St. Louis, there's the competition between the public-private schools and schools that can recruit and technically aren't supposed to, and schools that can't recruit and technically try but don't admit to trying. So it was a lot of fun. You got to check that out. Zach, what's going on in your world here? You got a point that you want to bring up, be it soccer related or life, or what's itching your crawl?
It's one that has sparked a lot of discussion lately, and it's one that we've talked about a lot on this show, and I'd love to get our guest opinion on this at some point. We've gotten opinions across the spectrum, but for the first time in the United States, a professional soccer league is going to a promotion and relegation schedule starting in 2028, thanks to the USL and their new Division 1 platform that they're starting here soon. This is a direct competitive blow or shot fired at the MLS to challenge them as the top soccer pro league in the United States. Now, it's a long shot because the money is still on the side of MLS, and there's a lot of resistance on the part of the MLS due to league fees and investments and things like that to ever go to a pro rel. But it's really exciting to finally have a European style platform in the United States for soccer.
Yeah, I think my initial gut reaction to it was, because obviously we had heard the rumblings for a while back from friends of ours that are, wear certain titles over there at USL, that are in the
Hmm.
know. They were kind of alluding to, the chess pieces being moved around. So I can't say I was surprised that it came out. I think I was hoping it would come out, and it did. What I will say is I'm extremely impressed by the kind of the social media reaction in particular. As much as MLS purists are going to be like, oh, it's always going to be an inferior league. All the money's over here. I don't think they could have even have estimated that the passion for pro rel, it's real. I mean, it's big. There was not a soccer publication that didn't have that news as front page top headline. And the enthusiasm for it was crazy. Anecdotally, I had two people, one a serious person, the other one a joker, that both texted and say, "Hey, let's buy a USL One franchise and work our way up." And how many times have we talked about on this show
Yeah.
the effect, the media effects of Ted Lasso on the game, the media effect of Welcome to Wrexham on the game, and the
Hmm.
popularity
Hmm.
and the influx of influencers that are wanting to become a part of it, right? So now you have that whole Wrexham opportunity, that promotion of making it to the bigs is now available here. It's cool. I think this is MLS has to be careful because they already shot themselves in the foot last year, leading up to the whole Open Cup. You know what? We're really not into the Open Cup thing anymore. Well, that didn't go over
Hmm.
well, right?
No.
And now you've got it's not a competing league, but it is becoming a competitor, whether they like it or not, because the payrolls are going up, the transfer opportunities are going up, the population and the attendance is going up. Look, if I'm an investor, this is like a baby stock. Give me that small cap
Hmm.
USL. I'll bet on the growth. So
Yeah, and I think the fact that you've got so many different markets that are in the USL that are not in MLS, Detroit, even states like Oklahoma and Alabama that do not have pro soccer at the MLS level now have opportunities to really be on a big stage, and I think it's really critical. I think it's going to have a huge impact on the Open Cup. Um, Probably negative if the MLS is in charge, but it's going to be interesting, and I think I'm excited about it. And on a side note, Ted Lasso is coming back for season 4,
yeah,
so it's
see,
just going to keep
my yeah,
it's just going to keep going.
I have fears. I have fears of
I do
seats
too.
like
I do
we've
too.
all been there. We've seen it. When
Yeah.
when your favorite shows like let's add one more. And
Yep.
here's the problem. Uh the reason those shows are really really good is because the writers were really really good. And then when you have a really really good show, guess what happens to the cost of those writers? It goes really really high. And that's when they go, "Oh,
Hmm.
plenty of writers can do this." Well, it's not the same thing. That's my fear with Ted Lasso because I doing a little bit of nerd digging, you do have some new names that are helping write, and it's like, oh my god, I'm worried, man. I don't know. I'll watch, but I'm gonna timestamp this as an "I told you so" moment. What do you think, Zach?
Oh, I'm with
Oh,
you. I think so too. I mean, and they're switching from the Richmond FC apparently to a woman or women's team. So that's going to add some interesting elements. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm not going to hold my breath yet, but I'm excited that it's at least they're giving it another chance.
yeah. You know what? I would be more impressed if he just would have went back to Sports Center commercials, or NBC, Premier League commercials. That'd be great.
Well, it's funny on a quick note, very quick note, because it's relevant, I think, a little bit to our conversation we're going to have with our guest. So our guest, you're going to hear he has an accent. It's not a European accent.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm a little worried
that's
about the
going to drive a
numbers. I'm
ton
worried, because
of guests.
that Irish English thing that bumps numbers up. I don't know about this one.
But well, here's what's funny. I saw an interview of a coach that was Jason Sudeikis's high school basketball coach, and he's got a little bit of a drawl, and he was the inspiration for the Ted Lasso character. that was created by Jason Sudeikis. And so there's just something about that charm that can come from, that style of speech. And
no,
so I'm very excited about our guest to talk more about that as well.
no pressure at all, Mr. Spain. We're going to roll you in on that
Nope.
note. You've been sitting there nodding your head in agreement because we clearly know our shit. But now we're going to let you add to it. Coach Robert Spain, hailing from the Montgomery region, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Right on. You are currently down at Huntingdon College, and we're going to talk about your path. We're going to talk about your experiences, but I guess maybe start from the pre-working days. I believe you're back in your backyard. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, and we'll get into the soccer stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I'm from Alexander City, Alabama, which is a small town. I don't think anybody listening has probably ever heard of it. We're known for two things. Well, really three things. It's Russell Athletic was founded here. I went to Benjamin Russell High School, which is the guy that founded it. Terrell Owens was the big star that came out of our high school.
Ooh, T.O.
T.O., yep. And it's one of the top 10 retirement destinations in the country because we have a lake. It's similar to like Lake Ozarks. It's called Lake Martin. So you have a lot of wealth on the lake and then little old industrial town 10 minutes off of it. So that's where I'm from.
So a lot like the Lake of the Ozarks. I'm just hoping there's less illicit substances down there. Please tell me. Yeah,
there's not that I know of. There's not a lot of that.
Yeah, because the Lake of the Ozark anymore, you get in there and you're getting out and your skin is neon. It's not quite the retirement destination. Anyway, we've jumped the shark already. So you're from down south. You've been in the game. Let's go back to one of the things we were talking about. I want to get your take on it. We were talking about the USL making the big news splash yesterday on the top three. The Division I, the Championship, and League One are now going to be operating in a pro rel format. When you saw the news, or maybe you heard it coming down the pipe as well, but when you saw that it broke, give us your 2 cents on what that really means to not only the USL, but maybe just kind of the popularity of the game in general, and for these markets that are not major city MLS markets.
Yeah, my initial reaction was it's incredible for the American soccer landscape. And I don't think I'm an MLS guy or USL guy, and I don't think a lot of people out there probably are one or the other. I think it's just we want the game to grow. If I'm USL, I think it's genius because you're grabbing attention in a different way. You're competing for attention in a different way than MLS is. So as an American consumer for soccer, we're sitting here thinking this is great. You've got the billionaire owners with the beautiful stadiums like you guys have in St. Louis, we had in Columbus. And then you have the stories of promotion and relegation, good stories, bad stories, and everything that comes with it. So there's drama all over the place. The thing that we're not going to be sure of until it happens is, does the quality improve? Which we would all assume it does, but that stuff may take time, like you said, Zach. So I'm excited for it. Very, very excited.
Yeah, I think one of the X factors on this type of a format, it is the money thing. Because when you have players that are, if you're in that third tier and you're a top 4 or top 5, or you're close to whatever that threshold is for promotion, inevitably you're going to play a little bit different. Because now because you know what's going to happen as the team grows and jumps leagues. You're fighting for more dollars. Let's just call it what it is. It's not pride. Everybody's going to talk about pride, and we're going to bring our fans up with us. No, that's all bullshit. They want to make more money, and they want to put it in their pockets, players too. And we, the fans, benefit from that. And then you have the reverse effect that if you're in the top tier and you're shit and you're having a bad season, well, the risk is it's going to change your psyche, and that's the one thing in sport. Like, you love it, and it's the underdog thing. Talk a little bit about maybe your own opinion of that, compare and contrast, because as of right now we're in the middle of March Madness. The greatest thing about March Madness is the 14, 15, 16 seeds, right? Yep. Well, Pro Rel does that.
Absolutely, and we all know in our sport there's less scoring actions than you're going to see in March Madness, so you should have more chaos with the smaller clubs or the smaller markets that can punch above their weight, which that's one of the reasons I would assume we all love it is anything can happen and anybody can beat anybody. So, yeah, I think they're onto something big, and it's exciting to see how it gets rolled out.
So let me ask you this, Robert: if this goes well with the USL and ProRel becomes an adopted, format, when does the NCAA start looking at different options? I mean, soccer's already being talked about in a lot of different formats and a lot of different platforms, from competition to roster size to all kinds of things. How do you think a ProRel system in the United States could potentially, now we're prognosticating, right? We're not going to set this in stone and say, well, Robert Spain said on March 20th, 2025, that this is what's going to happen. But I'm just curious, do you think that movements like that with the MLS and USSF and USL will have an impact on collegiate sports, or collegiate soccer specifically?
That's a great question. I haven't thought too much about it, obviously, since the news came out, but I would go back to, and I don't know if it still exists, but I know BYU on the men's side had an extremely strong men's club team. They used the facilities on campus, and they played, I think, in USL, like League Two in the summers, or PDL. It was back when it was called PDL. I think that's an interesting model that maybe schools could save money, but also have like a professional type team and in a smaller market. I'm looking at Auburn right here, right? Like maybe that would be a cool model. I'm not sure, and I don't know what the NCAA cares about soccer at this point. They've got a lot of battles to go on in the other big revenue sports. But yeah, that's a good point, Zach. I think that'd be cool to marry the two together, ProRel and NCAA. That'd be interesting.
So let's talk.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Well, I wanted to get into your own introduction and activity within the NCAA. Just to kind of like map this out a little bit for the listeners. You're from down south there, as we mentioned earlier. You ended up ultimately playing at University of Charleston over their D2 program. What was that where you crossed paths with Travis? Is that correct?
So that's my alma mater, and he coached after I was there. Okay. So it's kind of like you pay attention, the head coaches, some of the players on the roster, but I knew he was an assistant there. So we don't know each other well, but I know of him.
Yeah,
I'd be fortunate if he knows of me.
Yeah, that's Travis Henry. For those of you that are listening, Travis Brent. He is previous guest on the show, coaching. Oh my gosh, now I'm drawing a blank. Franklin Pierce. Yeah. Yeah, dude, I told you early morning, my wife and kids are out of town, got a little fog going on here. Let's get into your coaching post playing. Talk about, some of the early programs that you were at and kind of what drew you into coaching there. Let's talk a little bit about those programs, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I was a sports management major. I went to school thinking I wanted to coach, and then you get into the business school and start to work on different projects, and you get interested in different aspects of the game. So immediately after college, I worked for the LA Galaxy for 2 seasons. I just so happened to be there in 2011 and 2012 with Beckham and Robbie Keane and Landon Donovan, but I was on the front office side. And I kept finding ways to try to sneak off and watch training and take clients out to watch training. And I kind of realized that I'm not a business person. I'm a soccer person. I want to be on the grass. So I left the Galaxy and immediately went to a D3 assistant coach in Pennsylvania called Moravian College. And I was there for a year. It was a lot of fun, learned a lot. And like every young assistant, you think you know everything. And I wanted to be a head coach right away. 27, 28 years old. And I accepted a D3 head coaching job in Pittsburgh for Pitt Greensburg. Mm-hmm. And really, it was fascinating because they had a bunch of returning seniors, and the roster was full. I didn't have to recruit right away. The AD basically said, I want the seniors and the juniors to have a great experience. That's what you're coming in for. So it was kind of like dipping your toes in the water. I can just focus on coaching and culture. I'll figure out the recruiting stuff later. So it was kind of a nice introduction to being a head coach. Really successful there, and got opportunities to go jump to the D1 world. So I went to NIU in Illinois. Incredible staff there. I learned a lot from that staff. I was the lowest man on the totem pole there, learning everything and how to recruit, how to coach, different tactical elements that obviously I'd never been exposed to. And that earned me an opportunity to be at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. So I went back to Pittsburgh. That's where my wife is from. So it was a nice mix to go back to, be with, she was my girlfriend at the time, but now my wife, and take a step up and be the recruiting coordinator and assistant coach at Duquesne. So yeah, it was kind of the whole like climb the ladder type thing. But as you guys know, in soccer, you kind of have to move if you're climbing the ladder. So it's really rare.
Yeah, let me ask you a couple questions on that. So as a D3 head coach and then going over to Duquesne, and you were the recruitment coordinator, I think what a lot of our listeners love to hear about is kind of the recruitment process for the different levels within the NCAA. And you have kind of a unique experience in that you've been a part of D2, you've been a part of D3, you've been a part, a lot of different systems. I'm not expecting you to give a dissertation on the differences necessarily, but if you could kind of highlight, like if somebody is still in the midst of, going through the recruitment process, and we have a lot of those. In fact, JB and I and Jared, our other co-host, our boys are right in the thick of it. JB and Jared's sons are 4 months away from being able to be recruited. My son's, 9 months into this deal. And so I think there's a lot of folks that are really interested in just kind of some of the unique differences that might come up when you're talking to a D3 program, which we know scholarships are not there, to a D2 program or D1 where scholarships are part of it, but academics might, just anything you want to kind of highlight on that, I think is really something that resonates with our listeners.
Yeah, I think my first thought goes to, and it may sound corny, it may sound like a kind of hammed answer, but I think it's actually true. Academics matter regardless of which level you're at, simply because of the academic scholarships. And I've been at schools where they will not allow coaches to stack an athletic and academic scholarship unless the academics are at a certain threshold, which is like a 3.5 for that specific school. That's hard for the coach to go find a guy who they want, who's a good soccer player, but also has the good grades. So you have to kind of choose, are they here for their grades and they have a scholarship with their grades, or are they here for their athletics? It's beautiful to get both. That's rare. Other schools, they don't care about the stacking. There is no threshold. They can stack anybody, but yeah, you're going to get more academic money if you have better grades, which the coach saves money athletically then. So there's always an incentive for the coach, whether it's D1, D2, D3, to find players that have good grades. It's that simple. And then obviously some schools, SAT, ACT optional, others are heavily weighted into the decision for the academic scholarships. But that's the first thing I would say is, regardless of level, academics are going to be a huge indicator of it, if it's affordable for you or not.
So now I want to follow up on that real quick, JB, because I think this is a really important topic. We've covered and we've talked about how important the grades are across every level. But I think you said something that's really, really important to understand, which is it's up to each individual school. But if you can, as a student athlete, prioritize your GPA as part of your pathway, you're going to have a lot more options down the road than if you're only focusing on the sport side of it. Would you agree with that?
I would, definitely, especially if you're talking about D1, D2, and you have athletic scholarships. And look, I'm not trying to paint it with a broad brush, but it's turning into very transactional 1-year agreements. With the transfer portal, with the international players coming, there's agencies in every single country that are trying to place players in this country. It's great. There's good opportunities here. For American players, which I would assume most of your listeners are American players or American parents, yeah, like the more that you can put yourself, like, I'm not going to be a problem. I'm going to go to class. I'm going to help your team GPA. I'm not going to affect your APR. All these things, you make yourself more valuable to those programs for sure.
So let's talk a little bit outside of the X's and O's, along the lines of, some of the things that you were either taught to look for or that you would look for organically. I always liken it to the it question, but as a recruiter, you're expecting, you go to watch a kid play, you're looking at their technical and tactical and physical skills and all that. You assume those to be on a certain Mendoza line or above. We were just talking about how important academics are. A 4.0 is a 4.0 is a 4.0, right? And that says a lot about the kid above and beyond their academic ability. Take the academics and the athleticism or soccer isms out of it. From a recruiting perspective, what are some of the intangibles that don't show up on a resume that you have looked for or have been successful in isolating when it comes to recruiting a player?
Yeah, so I think I learned a lot of this when I was in Columbus and we were scouting, 13 and 14-year-olds that we were trying to project to be pros because they're not fully developed. They're not fully athletic, right? They're not 6'3" yet. And sometimes you don't know who's going to be tall, who's not. It's all mentality. It's mentality. And you can start to see that with 13 and 14-year-olds. On the field, you can see it definitely when mistakes happen. Whether it's them or their teammate, or they go up a goal or they go down a goal or whatever happens, it's mentality. We had a saying that we were looking for three things: ATM, athleticism, technical ability, and mentality. And if you have all three of those things, it's like an ATM. You're worth money. I can pull money out of you. You're an ATM. If you don't have the mentality, you're just a good player, and you're probably going to continue to be a good player, but you're not going to be a pro.
So take a second, though, and I really want parents in particular that are listening and paying attention, pay attention harder here, because the mental side, I know what you're talking about. I think it's just because, Zach and Jared and I, we sit on the front row of so many of these games. We've seen Kevin Sullivan on the field. We've seen Chase Adams on the field. We've seen these kids in person, and I can see what you're describing. But how do you break out? What does that really look like when you say somebody's got the mentality, right? Give some maybe examples of what that looks and feels like.
Yeah, I'll give you two. So technically, the first one, and it's a mental with the technical. A lot of times in youth soccer, you're not playing on pristine fields, right? Sometimes the balls bounce up. Sometimes the teammates might punch a pass a little too hard. If it goes up to around their knee or their shin or their ankle and they can bring it down comfortably, they're technically sound. But also, if they're not complaining to their teammate, like, hey, I want this better, they just get on with it and they just solve the problem. And they just say, you know what? I got it. Don't worry. That gives you some insight into who this kid is. Like, he's a competitor. He doesn't need things to be perfect. He can kind of deal with some chaos, right? Those two things are really important. Not just technically. No player is going to have a perfect game. Otherwise, they're playing at too easy of a level. Like, you want to see them in a challenging game that other players are good, their teammates are good. Sometimes referees may make a mistake. Sometimes that player you're watching may make a mistake. You can see with their body language who slumps their shoulders, who throws their arms up, who's talking back to their coaches, who's talking back to their teammates, right? You can easily see it of who is locked in to what the next action is going to be. I'm going to try to perform the next action to the best of my ability versus who's stuck in the past. And it's a small insight. It takes 3 to 5 seconds, but it's a big indicator on what's going on inside that player's mind. And it's a big indicator on what they're going to be, 19, 20, 21 years old.
Yeah, I love that, because parents, all of us know exactly what that is. Case in point, there's not one of us that haven't got in the car after a shit game and have heard at some point our child say something to the effect, that ref, or that, that player, like it's frustrating, but they've got to be broke of that somehow. And if they're not broke of that, that's something that's a red flag. Go ahead, Zach.
I was going to ask a follow-up to that because, you've got experience also on the academy side, right? Where a lot of these kids are forming their professional, I used air quotes there for those that can't see me, which is everybody except for the three on the call.
No. This is on. If you're on Spotify, look at your screen. You just saw Zach.
You just saw me do air quotes. So my question to you then is, if these academies and clubs, so I'm not going to just call out just the MLS academies, what responsibility do you place kind of on the coaching staff or the programs themselves, um, in that, for responsible for helping those kids understand what you just said? Parents are the number one thing. That's why we do this show. But are there some coaches, programs that probably should also listen to this to help their kids?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's about the right time and the right age, right? And it's different for every kid. I'll give you an example. So in Columbus, Mark Nichols, the technical director for the club, Brian Rodriguez was brought in to start this program. And then I worked with him because it worked with all of our affiliate programs. So we started, it would be like a pre-academy, right? We didn't call it that, but it would be a hybrid program where these players are with us in the academy 2 times a week, with their home club 2 times a week. And they were selected almost like a mini national team, right? It's a 10-week window. And we would purposefully tell the clubs, the club directors, the club coaches, we are removing this player for the next 10-week window. I want you to work with them on how they're overcoming this, because they're a good player. We're going to bring them back in. I want to see how they react at 13, at 12, how they react to getting somewhat cut. Now I did the air quotes too. Somewhat cut from the program, but knowing that they think they can come back in. We want to see that early. So you can still create an environment where it's still secure. They're still safe, right? They're not fully cut. We're not crushing dreams, but you can give opportunities that are, on the big grand scheme of things, a 10-week window is not that big of a deal. And how do they overcome it? And that's a parent working with the club coach, with the club director, with the pro club, with the scouts. We can all work together as adults to give this player opportunity to say, look, we still believe in you. It's not over. How do you overcome this? How do you work harder? How do you get back and you're a better player next time you get called in? We can create those without playing games with kids, if that makes sense. You can go too far. But I think, the parents and the clubs can definitely work together for that, for sure.
Can you
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Can you take a second and maybe, this is a parallel issue or subject matter in regards to what we're discussing right now, and that is kind of the role or the compare and contrast of this idea of development versus competition and struggle and winning, right? Because we see front row, so many of the academies will, I would say, overly emphasize player development at such a young age that a lot of these players are kind of immune to not caring about losing, or not establishing a rival, or some of those kind of embedded characteristics that you want when you build a team that has one job, and that is to win games. So how do you view in that U12, U13 up through, you get into the U18s and moving into college, how do you view the emphasis or the priorities within those age groups in balancing player development, again in quotes, versus teaching them how to win?
That's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? And I don't have a good answer. I don't know anybody that does. I know it's different for every kid. It's different for every market too. I don't know what the differences are with St. Louis and Columbus or Birmingham, Alabama. It's going to be different regardless of where you're talking about. But I think, you mentioned Chase Adams, for example. He was competing in every age, and it's just too easy. So for him, development means pushing him up, even though it kind of sounds ridiculous that he's playing with Crew 2 at 15 years old. But he needs to get pushed around. He needs to fail. He needs to have a week of training session that he is just struggling, and he's almost at the point of like, this is too hard, so that he can overcome it, right? So he's losing games, but he wants to win. And that's the trick, is how do you build that into players? And I don't know if it's in a training session or if it's from the parents' environment, the coach's environment. The kids want to win. They need to want to win individually, right? If you don't have that, you're probably not going to develop fully as a top-end player. All the tactical development stuff is secondary, in my opinion, if you don't actually want to win, if that's not why you're playing the game.
Yeah.
But I think some of this is natural, like as a country, like these kids don't understand really the opportunity they have when they're in a U15 MLS academy. They don't understand. I don't think, not all of them. They don't fully appreciate that they're billionaire owners that are building this for them. There's chefs making you food and the grass is pristine. They don't understand how lucky they are. And 10 years from now, maybe all those kids will get it and they'll understand there's 600 kids that want my spot. Wow. But that's a special kid to be 14 years old and understand that perspective. And that's rare. So I don't know if I answered your question, but well, I don't know if I have an answer.
Yeah, no, it's just, because on the flip side, when you look at clubs, dominant clubs, and we have a number of them in our own market here, there's stories of folklore of a group of kids that got together at U7, U8, and they ran the table for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and they only lost one game or whatever. And then whenever they do hit puberty and they do get into the true academy market and everything starts to dissipate a little bit, their reaction to struggle, their reaction to being on a team that is a 500 team, their reaction to not getting minutes is glaring. So I wanted to just kind of get you, maybe lean a little bit more into just your own experience at Columbus and how you guys handle, because you don't have really young teams within the Crew Academy. Is your youngest at U15? Is that the first year?
That's the first full-time year.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you see where I'm going with this, because you have a lot of kids that have come up through the system within the market that probably played on a team that could have gone 1 or 2 years of never losing, and then they enter into that. How, what were some of the things that you viewed or that Columbus did, the academy did, to kind of manage that transition as a little bit of a 101 for potential parents that are looking at the same thing coming down the pipe?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I would take away from that question or answer to put out there is I think the relationships with the local clubs was huge. I'm biased in that. I think it was pretty special that we're trying to drip feed information to those clubs as early as possible. So their directors, their coaches, and their parents are all aware of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to get you ready for. So yes, you're playing club. Yes, it's fun. Yes, you're traveling around the region or sometimes around the nation. But the main goal, the main objective when you guys hit 13, 14 is to be in the academy. That's going to be the benchmark if you guys are taking this serious. So how do we help you prepare for that? And you're not just going in blind, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of elements to that. There's coaching education, there's parent education, there's access to just seeing the facilities when you're 12. Right. So affiliates would walk through and bring their U12s or U11s around. It's like, oh, this is cool. I want to work for the next 3 years to get here. Things like that in our market was huge just to show guys what's possible. Now, we won't know if it works, until 8 or 10 years from now. Hey, there's these generations of players that are coming through that it all started when they were 8. And instead of Columbus having U8 teams and U10 teams, we had 34 affiliates that all had U8 and U10 teams. That was kind of our strategy, or still is the strategy. That's the way I would answer that, is you're trying to just spread information in a positive way instead of go all in on one all-star team at U8 and just hope they all make it by U15.
Yep. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I like this conversation because I think it hits on so many different elements that we try to cover. And because of your kind of breadth of background, you can speak to it from a personal point of view on how a kid that comes up through an academy, whether that's their club and goes into, an MLS academy or ECNL or whatever the case might be. Now you're seeing them on the other side from a recruitment standpoint. Yeah. So you're seeing the output from some of these. So I don't want you to give any names of anything like that, but where have you seen some of the better, not just technical skills, but also just the mental side? Where do you see that coming from? Is it the parent core? Is it a combo of parent plus academy and coaches? Is it high school kids? Like, I'm curious, and I'm not asking, again, not putting all this on Robert Spain to answer for the world, but because of your unique experiences, I think it's interesting to see just how to help a kid, and girl or boy, really get to the point where when they're on the pitch for a recruitment session, whether that's at we're going to Maryland in a couple of weeks for the Flex event. Hundreds of thousands of coaches will be there. What advice are you giving to those kids to say, hey, if you want to stand out, here are those things? And you've mentioned a couple of those, how to react after a bad pass or a ref, but narrow down a little bit if you could on some of those things.
Yeah, to answer your question, I do believe that the coach of that group, of that team, dictates quite a bit of the competitive drive, the culture, the togetherness, the feeling and the vibe of we're here to have success, and define what that success means. If it's, like JB said, if it's playing out of the back and having tactical identities that match the first team, there can still be intensity with that, right? Intense focus on whatever that is, because we want to make it look like the academy, or sorry, the first team and the second team, whatever. If it's an ECNL team or a high school team, there is no first team, and usually it's not a first team, but it's, we want to win this game, or we want to win this tournament, or we want to advance out of our group, or whatever it is. I think the answer is the coach drives that. And I've fallen in the trap of, the coach is the tactical mastermind, and his job is to have all the little patterns and movements and reverse engineer it and train it. Well, yeah, but you can't lose the social piece, the emotional piece, the competitive piece, the drive, the mentality. So to answer that question, I think coaches can pick up on it very fast when we're recruiting. I'll give you one example without mentioning club names. I took myself and my assistant, we went to 2 games this weekend, and the first game was a U17 game. The immediate game after was a U19 game. We're trying to recruit both ages. Mm-hmm. The U17 game, within 3 minutes of us sitting down, we looked at each other and we're like, this is dead. If we were at a showcase, we would get up and walk away. I don't care that these teams are close to us. I don't care that we know the coaches. We would just get up and walk away, because nothing we're watching is going to give us actual real context.
Wow.
We weren't really having a lot of hope for the 19s, but it was like a flip, a light switch flipped. It was intense from the get-go. And it was on the same field at the same time, the same 2 clubs. And it was like, what's going on? You can feel it. You guys can feel it too. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. So from a college coach perspective, our games are intense. We know that. Everywhere you go, whether it's D1, D2, D3, JUCO, NAI, every game is intense. You need to have players that are playing in intense environments. And there's different ways to create that, but I would say the coach drives that more than anybody else.
Let's take a second to talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Columbus and your experience there with Crew and the relationships, the affiliates, et cetera, but really the academy recruiting process. Because we know we've seen the players, we've seen the quote data that's out there on programs like look, I'm going to take a pot shot at them, Sporting KC, right? Their academy over there on the inferior part of the state has a really high number, a high percentage of players that are not from market. They are from Michigan. They're from Ohio. They're from a lot of areas that don't have MLS in market. Columbus, to me, whenever I started to see them, we were playing them. We were playing the Crew Academy often. It was almost like a kind of a rapid growth in the quality of play. Early on, I mean, look, no offense, we'll just be blunt. Like, the quality of play just wasn't there yet. And then, you start to see players like Chase come through, and just overall, it was elevating fast. Can you speak to your own experience within a market? Because middle of Ohio has soccer history, but it's not a pedigree area compared to a Dallas, a St. Louis, and LA, et cetera. So what was it like running the recruiting for the academy? How much were you going out of market? How much did you really focus in market? What did that balance look like?
Yeah, I could talk probably an hour about this specifically. I'll try to keep it simple. So my first job with the Crew, so for the first 2 seasons that I was with the Crew, I was hired to start the academy scouting process. I was the first head academy scout and trying to scale it. And, limited budget, you're one of only a handful of MLS clubs doing it. You're trying to be on the forefront. At that time, I mean, within about 5 months of me being there, the whole Anthony Precourt Save the Crew stuff happened. I was getting kicked out of youth soccer games. People hated the Crew. They hated Well, they love the crew. They hated the idea of the crew leaving. And we also ran our own youth soccer club, a pay-to-play youth soccer club that competed with everybody else in the market.
Yeah.
It wasn't our academy. It was a pay-to-play club that was alongside the academy. So there's a lot of confusion going on. So to scout local players was a mess. Let's just put it bluntly. It was a mess. We figured out very quickly, yeah, we love these local players, but it's kind of like pulling teeth. Either they're in or they're out. We'll figure it out pretty quickly. We need to go get the Aiden Morris. We need to go get the Dado Valenzuela, the Juan Castilla. We had huge players that are now homegrowns in on trial that, they chose other places. We found that was going to be the most successful to get the top 1% player. Ownership changes, right? The Haslams come in, they build the facility, they invest in crew 2, they invest in the scouting. Now all of a sudden, we're not getting kicked out of youth soccer games. It's the opposite. It's turned on its head. And we needed a way to strategically bring these local youth soccer clubs in. So now all of a sudden you can do both. So with our affiliates, we can get the best players, and we know who they are when they're 8, 9, 10 years old. So we can develop them before we need to scout them. Mm-hmm. And we can go get a Chase Adams when he's 14. And the Tristan when he's from, Michigan. He's from Michigan. We can bring him in when he's 13. So we could do both. That's when you start to see a rapid improvement, is you're no longer just pigeonholing yourself into one strategy over the other. You can do both. And that comes down to leadership. Yes, it takes investment for sure. Mark Nichols, Dan Locke, Kelvin Jones, these guys really started to see that and say, hey, ownership is going to go heavy into this. How do we strategically keep both options open and do both at an elite level?
So let me ask you this then, perfect world, just if you have your heart and your loyalty to the crew, if you could establish the ratio of local kids versus, imports, what would you like that to be? Is that a 75-25? Is it a 90-10? Is it a, what do you think is a sweet spot to basically validate what you're doing in market is working, as evidenced by the percentage of players that are from market as opposed to imported?
I don't know if there's a perfect number, but I would say the strategy, and it's what is happening now. Again, it's going to take 8 to 10 years to see. I would say you have your hands all over every single one of the clubs in the state, and you know them when they're 8, 9, 10. You know if there's any pockets that need to be filled. Not to create a team, but hey, we don't have pros in this age, and that's okay. There's just generations that are that way, and you also need to understand that there's a handful of top players like Chase Adams that I don't care where they're from, they're a pro, and our fans are going to love to watch this guy. The same as the DPs, right? Like everybody loves watching Diego Rossi and when Cucho was here, and that's the whole point of MLS. So you can have the same thing going on in the academy. I don't think there's a perfect ratio. It's more of an order of operations. I would say the order of operations is focus on your local market first, develop them, not just recruit, develop and recruit. And you can always recruit 13, 14-year-olds from around the country.
Yeah. Go ahead, Zach.
This is interesting, and I think it's probably a market strategy that would define each academy, right? Meaning, as JB kind of put, where the talent is where you're going to go. Similar, kind of jumping back into the college ranks. One of the things that happens, and you can attest to this, I'm sure, being on the crew sidelines and being a part of this, when you do bring kids from out of market that do take spots from kids that are in market, that creates some tension. When you're bringing international kids or kids from the transfer portal into your college program, that displaces local kids or kids that are traditionally recruited.
Is that a big issue these days?
That's what I was going to ask you. That was my question.
That was me being facetious.
Yeah, I know. But that was really kind of the lead up to my question, is just those disruptive elements, that when you're bringing kids from out of market, you're cutting kids. How is that impacting Huntington? How does that impact you as a coach?
Good question. My philosophy on it comes down to trust. And, I'm an Alabama kid. I actually came to Huntingdon as a freshman. I played here as a freshman. So I do have ties here. Obviously, my family is all from here. I care about the Alabama kids. And I would say the Panhandle of Florida is it's not the same as Alabama, but regionally, like that's kind of our backyard.
Sure.
Those two areas. Sure. They need to trust that we're looking there first. Same order of operations. They need to trust that we want the best players, and we're going to go after them. And yeah, we have standards, but this is a place that they should feel safe. This is a place that they should know they can develop. At the end of the day, though, if you need a left-sided center back and you just haven't been able to develop one, or you haven't been able to get the best one you want, there's nothing wrong with going to the transfer portal or going JUCO and saying, I need a left center back, because that's going to help my Alabama kids on the field when they're here in the fall. I just think it's a matter of trust of, hey, let's go to the number one high school team in the country who happens to be top 5 in the country, who happens to be here in Birmingham. I want to go after your players. That's the first place I'm looking. And then after that, we'll keep going. And then if you have to go in the transfer market, we will. But at the end of the day, like, my hand is kind of forced there because we don't have scholarships. We're D3. Historically, this program doesn't have a lot of a culture of winning. So we have to create that to be something that people would be excited to come to. So it kind of lets us focus on our local players first. But yeah, that might be a problem in the future, which is a good problem. But I would always say these local coaches, local directors need to know that we want to trust going after their guys first.
So your answer takes me back to the conversation that we had with Mike Seabolt from Missouri State.
Yep.
Obviously, his program is one that's got a target on its back, just from the roster perspective, and I really like Coach Seabolt a lot. He's become a friend, outside of soccer. But he said something during our conversation that really resonates, and it sounds as if you're kind of alluding to the same thing. When asked about bringing in the best St. Louis player or somebody locally, his comment was simply, "Look, if they're good enough, we are going to offer, and if they're that good, they're going to play."
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, college coaches in particular are purely measured on wins and losses. Bottom line. You win, keep your job for the most part. That's where you're at. At a Missouri State, right?
Yes.
You have to win. So let me kind of just stay within this realm of this topic. Let me just ask you just a personal question regarding the lack of guardrails, or at least that's the way most of us view the landscape with the transfer portal, the volume of users of the portal, the volume of international rostered players. All these things seem to be occurring in a vacuum. Where's your own personal, through Robert Spain's lens? If you had the keys to the car, are you changing this a little bit, or are you just kind of like, you know what, these are the rules, let's just deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really spend too much time thinking about if I could change it. I think that's a dangerous game to play, at least for me personally. I kind of like where it's at, and that's why I chose to come here. Is D1 and D2.
Let me interrupt. Let me just ask a pointed question, because I know that was awfully open-ended after I heard it come out of my mouth. Transfer portal. Let me just ask you: if a kid transfers, should there be a probationary period? Because right now, no, there's not. So should they be limited?
No.
I think he answered. Yeah, he's pretty clear.
I think the answer
it's
is no.
Zoom, man. I'm not good on the Zoom.
But here's what I would say. I think D1 and D2 have clearly, and this is from the NCAA, right? Have clearly made it a transaction, and that's great. It's professionalized. The coaches know it, the players know it, the clubs know it, the high school coaches know it, the agents for all the international players know it, and that's okay. Play the game. Play the game. You can still build a culture that way. You can still have players that are attracted to come to you, just like professional clubs. Great, do it. D3, we've gone a completely opposite route. Most D3s. It's more of a builder. We want to build cultures. We want to develop players. And if you look at the Final Four, every single one of those rosters is heavily littered with juniors and seniors that have gone through that program. This is where you develop. And there's options for an 18-year-old kid. Which one do you really want to be in? Do you want to be in a place that's going to develop you and believe in you, and we're not going to kick you out because we can go in the portal? Or do you want to be in a transactional, which is a real pro environment? It is. There's pros to that and there's cons to that. There's no wrong answer. I like that there's options. And there's some gray areas. Some D2s and D1s still believe in developing and building a culture. Not saying that all D1s don't have a culture. I'm not saying that. There's just different ways to do it. D3s are more
like
long term.
Like Marshall? No,
I'm
just kidding.
No. Honestly, I love the guys at Marshall because, so Chris Grassi coached at my alma mater at Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Faga, the associate head coach, I coached with at Duquesne. We were on the staff together. They do an incredible job. They play like a pro team. They train like a pro team. They recover like a pro team. They travel like a pro team. What a cool experience, right? You got to go. I love it.
I love what you said, Robert, about the options. And I think we sometimes forget about that because we think sometimes, and I'm going through this and I'm speaking, I'm projecting. We think that if our kids don't hit that D1 program or that D2 program, that their soccer career is over, that all the stuff that we've done for the last, 10 years with them is just a waste of time or a waste of money for a lot of folks. But I love what you're saying, which is, you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go, but you can always still end up at a different level. Meaning you might not settle by any way, shape, or form, but you might choose to go to a D3 program because you like the culture, because of the academics. You might hit a growth spurt and you might ball out for a year or two and become an actual prospect for a D1 program like a Marshall. And so I really appreciate you kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit. Unfortunately, I have to bow out and give you back to JD full time because I have to.
He's like, I got to bow out too.
All right, I'm leaving
Robert,
too.
So great to meet you, man. It's great to talk to you. Good luck this season. I'm sure we'll keep in touch, but I really appreciate you joining the show.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate
See you, Zach.
it.
I'll catch you later. Mr. Spain, mano a mano now, toe to toe. I'm going to keep asking redundant questions, so don't worry.
Okay.
No, this is something that I just think it's a byproduct of everything that's going on, just 10,000 foot view of life in America in 2025. These are sticky issues. And when it comes right down to it, and I agree with you. I'm not looking for a particular answer because fundamentally I agree. Like, look, clubs need to be better, academies need to be better, college staffs need to get better. Everybody just needs to continue to improve because at the end of the day, the goal is we need our national team to lift a trophy at some point, right? Yep. All of this is a moot point if we don't win at the highest level, and that's the highest level. MLS is growing. We talked about USL earlier. So college, where do you view college soccer now as it pertains to kind of that pro pathway? Because, Columbus is exhibiting it. St. Louis is we have 3 homegrowns that have already signed. Caden Mackay and Tyson Pierce, all of them have been in national team pool camp, and their upside's tremendous. This is occurring across the board, and these are kids, the names that I'm mentioning, like a Chase out of Columbus. These kids are not going to college. We'll call a spade a spade. They're going straight pro, and the numbers are growing where the academies are the fast track to the pro life. Talk about the role that colleges play, at the highest level. The type of players, the type of, maybe even positionally, we see often, especially in the MLS draft, when you look at the draft, and if you're a nerd like me and you look at the positions that are being drafted, there's not a lot of 10s. It's a whole bunch of backline. It's a lot of defenders. It's a lot of goalies. These are older, bigger, more mature players. Can you talk about the role the college is playing, moving forward in facilitating pro pathway to the highest levels?
Yeah, and I would think, I would say like each college level is slightly different, and I would kind of put D3 on a different plane than the D1, D2, and NAIA. And there's a different answer for Americans and internationals because of the MLS rules of you need an international roster spot to take that German 24-year-old that's spent 4 years in college. So that means they have less of a chance. But yeah, for the Americans, I'll start with the D1s and D2s. Like, yeah, there is a pathway to pro. It's becoming slimmer, if we're being honest. It's for MLS. I think USL with promotion relegation, I think there's going to be a lot more pathways opening for college players to go into the pro life there, and it's becoming more and more like a pro life every single year. But I also think, I'm jumping around as well, but the Chase Adams, the Owen Prestis, these guys that sign pro contract early, I wish we could treat them like the German kids that also signed pro contracts when they were 18, but somehow they still have eligibility to play NCAA college soccer. I don't know how we can't go backwards and do both, but that's for another time. But yeah, I think college is a pathway. It depends on the program. It depends on the level. But I would very much hesitate to tell parents or players, go to college so you can go pro.
Well,
I don't think that's a really smart angle.
So there's a great follow on X or Twitter or whatever you call it. This guy, he's actually going to be a guest on the show here in the near future. His name is Mark Kelkenberg. Are you familiar with Mark? Kelkenberg?
I'm not. I'm sure I've seen something that's been reposted, but I don't know him specifically.
I would advise all listeners, go follow him, yourself included. He's really good at the data, breaking down kind of prospects from MLS academies through colleges. And he just recently put out 2 sheets of data sheets. One is the former college players to MLS. Some of the simple numbers off of this, of the 2025 rostered players, the listed players, the percentage of players that have college experience. I'll quiz you. What percentage of players in MLS do you believe have college experience?
I would guess it's between 20 and 40%.
Spot on, 30% on the nose. That in the top programs that are listed are the usual suspects, right? Georgetown, Wake, Indiana, Duke, Stanford, Akron, North Carolina, etc. Now, here's the interesting thing. He did the exact same graphic for USL. 2025 rostered players. Take a guess. College experience in the USL championship.
It's got to be 60 to 75%.
52%. So a little. I thought it would be a little bit higher, but even still, 52%. That's a lot bigger number than 30% when you look at the total size of the league. And same thing. Usual suspects: Pitt, UNC, Clemson, Creighton, Akron, Georgetown. So it's one of those things, and I agree. The expansion of USL going into Pro Rel. Ironically, there's probably going to be more opportunities for college players, while MLS is, it's tougher because MLS is still an import league. I mean, it just is.
I think I don't know how it's going to go with the Pro Rel, but I think MLS is going to shift heavily into. You're going to see the top DPs, the top end guys on the roster. That who cares how old they are? Well, some clubs like Atlanta, Columbus will care because you want to resell, like the Almiron, the Cuchos. But it's just the top guys that affect the game, that sell tickets, that win games. That's all that matters. And then the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have very, very young players that you could potentially sell, like Aiden Morris. USLs, I would imagine, won't focus too much on player sales. They'll focus on getting promoted. And that's kind of a cool thing for Americans to think about it like that is, I'm not watching my USL team because I'm looking for the 16-year-old academy kid to break through. Like, I want my team to get promoted.
Yeah.
And I'm watching my MLS team to be like, oh, that's cool. I want to follow an Aiden Morris when he goes over and plays in England. That's cool. And now I have a team in England to support. I don't know. I like that. I like the kind of dueling opportunities for an American to watch.
Yeah, it's because I kind of alluded to it. In today's market, you have so many parents and just Monday morning quarterbacks that hate international players, and they hate the portal, and they hate all this. And at the end of the day, look, if their kid is good enough, they're going to play. They're going to get signed. They're going to move up, and that should be the focus. So,
JB, could I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I tell kids all the time, in here we're not going to have international players. It's an admissions thing. We don't have international admissions. We don't have a TOEFL score requirement, so you can take us out of it. My playing experience, being from Alabama, middle of nowhere, playing in college with our roster was probably 50-50 international 50, at that time. Now it's heavily international, but 50 American, 50. It was the coolest thing. to have international players on my
Yeah.
team. And they were incredible. It was almost like you could travel to Trinidad and travel to England and travel to Africa. That was not normal. That was worth the price of admissions for me. And I got to play, and like the team was good and all that, but like it was more fun to have international players. But there's a balance. If you're the only American on the roster, that is, I would agree with the parents. That's going to be rough. But if you're the only international on the roster, imagine that kid. He doesn't want to be the only international kid either. So it's always going to be a balance. But I think there's a cool experience for if a player's listening, that's a cool experience. But also if a parent's listening, that's a cool experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, because my own experience, I played at a school that was maybe a third, 25% were international players. And freshman, sophomore year of college, spring break, we didn't go to Panama. We went to London because we got to go hang out with Mick and his family. And it's just a different thing, the way that you experience it. So talk real quickly then. Give us the little 101 on your current school. Talk about the program a little bit. Make it a PSA, because we got families that are looking all over the country. What is it about the Montgomery area in your school that stands out, man?
Yeah, I mean, we don't talk to St. Louis families very often. I've only been here 2 months. We've mostly focused locally, but we're the only D3 school in Alabama. We're the only D3 school in Alabama or Florida. There's nowhere else to go for D3. We're a small private school, right around 1,000 students, so about 950, 960 students. So it's a small school, family, really, really family vibes, tight culture and community. You're going to walk to class and know 10 to 12 people every single day. There's no hiding, is what I would say to people. But as a school, we're one of the top 3 pre-professional programs in the South. So this is the whole point of the school is, yes, it's a private degree. We're getting you ready for law school. We're getting you ready for your MBA. We're getting you ready for your physical therapy school, whatever you want to do. This is where you come to get ready for it. And on top of that, it's a private school, but it's a public price. So you're going to have to go to law school, and that's expensive. Might as well save a little bit of money and prepare for it versus partying and going to the big 30,000 student public school. And the majority of the not majority, I would say probably 75. That is a majority. 75% of students here are athletes. So there's a different piece of a classroom is the football field, the lacrosse field, the soccer field. So this place really has a specific niche, which is clear. I think that's hugely important for any soccer program, is to be able to point to that niche of the school and say, let me build my culture around that niche, as opposed to let me just create it out of thin air and it changes with every coach. So we're really fortunate there. And then for my soccer program, hasn't had historical success. We're very successful in NAIA in the 90s, transitioned to the NCAA in the early 2000s, and have really struggled to kind of find our feet. And that's okay. It's not pinned on one person. There's been a bunch of people that have really tried. And now I get to take my swing at it. But the school wants every program to be successful here. And softball currently is in the top 10. Golf is always in the top 10. Football, I think, had a 6-5 record, and that was like the worst record in 10 years. So we take our sports pretty serious, as you'd imagine, as Southerners in SEC country. It's that kind of vibe of you get the best of both worlds and get a good degree out of it as well. I
love it, man. Well, I really I appreciate all your time and stories, inside info. The subject matter that we've talked about today, it's a sweet spot. It's a sour spot. It's a blind spot for a lot of parents and players that are going through the process. So your insight was really much appreciated. Hope you enjoyed yourself as well. Because here we are midday. We get you out here in time for lunch now, man.
Absolutely, yeah. Today is our last training day before spring break. So the guys already know we're going to have a little intra-squad scrimmage. So for us, it's fun to plan for because it's easier. You just put the most competitive teams together and let them play and compete. So, it's going to be a great day for sure.
I love it. Well, I'll have the link to your school and everything in the show notes here. So if you're listening, go give them a follow. Check it out. Coach Robert Spain, thank you for your time. Soccer Dad Pod, we are on our way out here. Like, review, follow, share, all that free stuff. Told you, I've said it before. It's kind of cliche and lame, but we have low self-esteem. So help us out. Any one of those four would be appreciated. Until next time, Coach Spain, pleasure.
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate you.
We'll see you next time.